For those of you unfamiliar with my previous works, the 7 books that comprise the Nodwell's timelines, I offer the following context for the tales you are about to read. In the universe established by the aforementioned books, there are several noteworthy characters commonly referred to as the big men. Some of them are good and righteous, some vile and despicable, but as in life, many of them exist in the gray area between those extremes. These big men generally possess one or more defining characteristics, such as an imposing and notably plump physique, a position of significant power and authority, and an advanced age, typically of at least 50 years or more. However, there is one attribute that all big men inevitably share, being the owners and wearers of at least one pair of fine, bespoke leather dress shoes that serve to distinguish and set them apart from other men, and subconsciously or consciously allow them to quickly be identified by their potential peers, colleagues, detractors, and rivals. The following 8 stories focus on several such men, their roles within the Nodwell's timelines, and in several cases, events that might be considered spoilers for those who've yet to read my previous works. That said, I have endeavored as always to tell these tales in as compartmentalized and standalone a manner as possible, which may still make them a suitable starting point for those interested in exploring the world of the big men by taking a few little strolls in their shoes. For those of you already familiar with this premise, and the many stories that have come before these, never fear. The following pages have been carefully crafted just as much with you in mind. Volumes from the Nodwell's timelines, in their order of publication. The Big Men. 309. Shards. The Nemesis Effect. Big Man Down. 500. The Spiral and the Threads. Paper or plastic? Kevin Chamberlain wasn't a happy man by nature. That said, he wasn't particularly unhappy or miserable either. In a lot of ways, he simply was, going about his business and making his way through life in whatever way seemed appropriate to him in any given moment. By any objective measure, he was a successful man, having held a series of increasingly prestigious and higher-paying office jobs throughout his career, which currently saw him overseeing the restructuring of a recently acquired, former competitor of his current employer. In short, he was the big dog, the guy in charge of his domain. If he wanted something, he got it. If he wanted someone or something gone, they were gone. No questions. No arguments. No bullshit. Things had been like that for years, and Kevin had become accustomed to it in a way a small part of him realized probably wasn't healthy or reasonable. If nothing else, his lifestyle had resulted in him blissfully strolling along a path toward obesity that he was nearing the end of. Mr. Chamberlain had always been a large man, with a few inches and several pounds on just about every would-be challenger he'd encountered in the corporate world, and he'd always embraced that, never hesitating to literally or figuratively throw his weight around, or overtly loom over anyone he saw fit to intimidate, for any reason. Still, as he'd entered his 50s, Kevin had been forced to admit that his ever-increasing girth had started to become at least somewhat of a liability, limiting his comfort, physical ability, and attractiveness to most members of the opposite sex in a way that he indeed found undesirable. Even so, Chamberlain hadn't felt compelled to make any adjustments to directly address the issue, preferring to simply hurl his considerable wealth at any related problems that arose. Be it in the form of the new, slightly larger, bespoke suit and pair of shoes he was currently wearing, or his recent acceptance of the notion of paying for sex to avoid the increasingly frequent stings of rejection he'd begun to experience when seeking to satisfy those desires. That had been a particularly hard pill to swallow, having found it an almost trivial exercise to hook up for a